Oh no. Julia just
That
vanished.
has got to be a first. Um, is my mic still crackly, by the way?
A little bit, yeah, still.
I
But
wonder,
we can still hear you and understand you, so it's not a problem.
wonder if it's my internet. That was totally my bad. I literally pressed the close window instead of the got it window and I kicked us all out. I'm so, so sorry. But we are now live streaming and recording, and I'm pressing got it instead of the close button. And here we are. Thursdays at 11 a.m. with bloopers attached. This week we are doing Love Tutoring Book Club. And the concept of Love Tutoring Book Club was basically for me to pull out the small and mighty books from my shelf and share them with you. There is no pressure for the members of our community to read the books, although some of us do, sometimes on audio at high speed, as far as I understand. But what happens in these conversations is I just get an opportunity to share some wisdom that I've learned and sort of guide the conversation forward. So I'm not sure if it is a book club. It might be an unbooked book club. And it could be that at the end of this conversation, we might be able to discuss what might be better or what books you might want to recommend. But today we have a yummy, yummy, yummy book. Oprah Winfrey's What I Know for Sure. This is one of those books that I have on in hard copy and in audio. And that's because being read to by Oprah Winfrey is just obviously a complete delight. And having her walk through my world with me whilst I'm folding laundry is always a lovely thing. But sometimes you want to be able to refer and bookmark and that kind of thing. And that's when I end up buying the copy. Obviously, I buy them secondhand to go along with the audiobook. Is that something that anybody else around here has done before? Yeah. No, Claire, are you more of an audio person or a hard copy person?
So it entirely depends. I actually will confess I'm quite a big library goer. If I get like a book club recommendation, I'm straight on the library's website to find out if I can reserve it. And if I find out there's an audio copy, yes, please, because do you know what I'm doing? My big treat is when I'm driving anywhere, as I listen to it as I'm driving. So
Yeah.
long distance journeys are no longer boring.
Yeah, and then you get that thing, don't you, where you associate something that you heard in the book with a place that you were, or something,
Yeah.
or the journey, and it becomes this sort of like sort of whole experience, doesn't it? I've actually got back into fiction for the first time in a long time. So most of the books on my shelf are non-fiction, and recently I've been dipping my toe back into fiction, and it's been quite lovely. And I find that I'm better with hard copy for fiction because I want to sit still and immerse myself. And with non-fiction, I'm better for audiobooks because I treat them like a podcast. So I want to be able to, as you say, to travel or to walk the dog and listen at the same time. Does that resonate with you, Jan?
To be honest, I mostly read PDFs or on Kindle nowadays.
That's really interesting because last time we spoke, we were speaking about teaching our students to, well, you inspiring your students to have a love of reading and to read for pleasure. So tell me about how you read for pleasure.
Actually, nowadays I read both for my classes, English literature, and also for myself, like to continuously learn new things. So I'm more prone to nonfiction nowadays. I just feel like the knowledge is more compressed and I can learn a lot in a like short time. But for fiction, I mainly do it for my classes because my students are very young and they're more into like adventure stories. So like these are the two category of books I read, one for my students and one for myself.
That's really, really interesting. And I'm curious to know whether that flips around, whether it goes in cycles. Jenna, do you find that you go in cycles with your reading? Jenna reads all the things because she's full of curiosity.
I don't read anymore. And the reason, and this is the first time I'm saying this in front of so many people, I have quite a severe reading addiction. And I have never found a middle ground. And it devastates me because I was that person who the teachers couldn't decide if they were angry at or not because I was always reading. It was my coping mechanism my entire life, and I love it. But right now, I listen to podcasts on a minimum of 2 times speed when I'm driving and when I'm doing things. And I get read to by my partner every evening, pretty much, to fall asleep. But I don't do audiobooks anymore. And I try very hard to not read. And I find that really, really hard as somebody who is in every way a bookworm. But if I do want to find a way of being able to read again and not have it take over my life.
So do you mean that you get so immersed that you get crabby and you don't want to engage in the real world? Is it an escapism thing?
I don't know. It is very much addiction. I cannot do anything to my and everyone else's detriment apart from read when I have read.
Is it for both fiction and non-fiction?
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how much I hate the book or even it happens even with Wikipedia rabbit holes or JSTOR rabbit holes. Yeah.
That is fascinating, and I'm really glad I asked. And thank you for sharing that with us, because there's tons of assumptions that we make about reading, that reading is good for you. And one of the things that I love about your participation in these conversations, Jenna, is that you do tend to explode assumptions, and that's really, really healthy. So everything in its limits. We had a funny thing in where's the echo?
That might be me, sorry.
Thank you. We heard a funny thing at World Book Day, didn't we? That somebody'd seen on the news, a child was interviewed and said, "I love reading because it gives me wings." And the interviewer said, "That's very inspiring. Where did you get that idea from?" And she said, "My teacher told me to say it." So there's a lot of received wisdom, yes, and a lot of again, assumptions that we're making about reading. And I think that, as with everything else, let's be honest and open about those things. But in terms of this book, which I have enjoyed many times, I will share with you first that I am not entirely sure how much I know for sure right now, because that is also part of being a human being. There are times in your life when you feel rock solid, and times in your life when you feel less so. And I found this book helpful, partly because Oprah, because of the autobiography element of hearing about Oprah's life story. Is autobiography something that anybody has spent much time with here? I recently was listening to Barbara Streisand's autobiography, which is 46 hours long and describes every dress and every meal. So it's blooming exhausting. And I only got 22 hours in, which I think was plenty. But the idea of an autobiography, and therefore learning from other people's journeys, is that something that we find helpful? And also, I'm always having in mind on, is it helpful for our students as well? Jan, what are your thoughts?
To be honest, I've only read one autobiography in my life. It's Educated.
Educated. Tara Westover.
Do you know this book?
Fantastic book.
Yeah, I love it. This one.
You found it. Oh, fantastic.
This one, Educated. It's just amazing to see her journey of growing up from a nobody in a village, and then how she developed the dream, etc., and tried to strive for it. Yeah, I really love this book.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And it's interesting because it's a novel, and an autobiography at the same time.
Yeah.
The story of educated Claire and Jenna, for your benefit, is a girl who grew up in was it an Amish community?
I don't remember quite well where she grew up, but I know like she kind of in a village.
So there was an extreme religious sect aspect to it, and the father had a mental health issue that was undiagnosed, and so the child grew up in a very, very unsafe home. And her life was put at risk frequently. But as I was just reflecting with my children, we were talking about this last night, because they're all readers in my house. We were talking about unreliable narrators, and we were talking about how when the author is a victim of abuse and falls into patterns of justifying the behaviors, and then goes through this journey of discovering and the reveal of what was actually happening and what was and wasn't okay, that in itself becomes fascinating because of how close it is to the human experience. Well, it's modeling our human experience. It makes me think of ourselves and our young people, our students, and safeguarding, disclosure, abuse, false accusations, and everything in between. And I would love to just explore that for a second, where if somebody is reporting what's happened to them, are they a reliable narrator? We're talking about autobiographies. What are your thoughts?
Lots. I think that it doesn't matter necessarily how truthful or untruthful or embellished or whatever that is in what is said, especially in the context of thinking about disclosures and things like that, because it all says something, and you can go down like the psychoanalysis route if you like, but I don't think it's necessarily even that deep, because, for example, for me, I was reading not necessarily so much autobiographies, but they were memoirs of kids who were abused and teachers who specialized in those young people. And I remember the first time I was handed one of those books, because I was hyperlexic and very, a big reader by that point, reading very heavy things and big things. And I was about 7. And I think that from a personal perspective, sharing things in my own life and using the words of others still was me sharing my story with other people. And just because other people saw it as lies, it wasn't. And I see this with so many young people all the time. I work with quite complex safeguarding needs and things like that. And just because you're using somebody else's words, that doesn't mean that you're not trying to use your own, even if it's completely different to the words that you meant to say.
That's fascinating. So it sort of lines up with the all behavior is communication. The fact that you're saying something means that you have something to say, and you're not necessarily there yet in that journey. And to be honest, we all, are like that in our lives. It is hard to say what we need, what we mean. And therefore there's probably a responsibility on the listener, or in the case of our autobiographies, on the reader, to have discernment and to be critically engaged. Jan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess it's also about the definition of an unreliable narrator. What do you mean by unreliable? Is that like you are telling the story from a very subjective way, only exposing one part of story? Is it that unreliable? So I feel like, yeah, how we define it is also
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, I mean, technically, the third person omniscient narrator is the objective one, and anything that's written in the first person will be unreliable and subjective. But over here, we brought in another layer because you brought Educated by Tara Westover, and we've pointed out that because that young person was abused by her family members, she didn't know better. She didn't know that she wasn't safe, and she fell into lots and lots of behaviors that you only saw by watching her patterns, that this was not healthy or helpful behaviors for her. And that becomes another layer of unreliable that actually really can inform the way that we think about life. Now, let's come back to this one, if that's all right with you. So we've just unpacked biographies a little bit and autobiographies. And I actually wanted to spend the last part of this conversation asking you to tell me what you know for sure. Okay, so that's a little bit of a heads up for you to do a bit of thinking about that. Now, there's no great big epitaph here. We're not going to be carving it into stone. So please don't take it too heavily. You don't have to there's no rights and wrongs. But I will share with you some of these and we will see what we feel together, which is also nice because I get to read to you. Where's she gone? Hold on. Here he is. Right. The first one disappeared. So let's do the second one. She talks about getting new puppies. Getting 3 new pups at the same time wasn't the smartest decision I ever made. I acted on impulse, charmed by their cute little faces, intoxicated by that sweet puppy breath and the bite on number 3, Layla. Hands up if you have a puppy. She's balmy. Then I spent weeks getting up at all hours of the night with them. I picked up pounds of poop and spent hours puppy training so that they would have good manners. It was a lot of work. I was sleep deprived and constantly frazzled from trying to keep 3 at a time from destroying all my worldly goods. Whoa, did I gain a big new respect for mothers of real babies. All this puppy love was starting to get on my nerves, so I had to make a paradigm shift. One day while I was walking them, I stood and watched them frolic. And I do mean frolic. Rolling, tumbling, chasing, laughing. Yes, dogs laugh. And leaping like bunnies. They were having so much fun, and seeing them that way made my whole body sigh, relax, and smile. New life discovering a field of grass for the first time. What a wonder. We all get the opportunity to feel wonder every day, but we've been lulled into numbness. Have you ever driven home from work, opened your front door, and asked yourself how you got there? I know for sure that I don't want to live a shut down life, desensitized to feeling and seeing. I want every day to be a fresh start on expanding what is possible, on experiencing joy on every level. What are your thoughts about puppies and joy and reframing and paradigm shifts? And feel free to relate it to rambunctious students if you need.
One of the things that me and one of my students were talking about yesterday is I always use the Marie Kondo's whole spark of joy thing. Like, does this spark joy? If it doesn't,
okay.
And if it does, keep it. And my student has a puppy, and I have a puppy as well, and it is chaos. And I like making sure that actively, deliberately seeking out those joys and those moments of wonder and those, I call them adventures.
I love that. Our Labrador, it has now left black hairs all over every corner of our house. The house smells. She's a disaster. Every time my mother comes over, she behaves badly. And I wonder what it's for. And then I sort of reflect on the fact that joy and tidy don't necessarily go together, which is very difficult for me because I grew up in a very, very tidy home. And it makes you think about what texture you actually want in your life. And do you need things to be picture perfect, or is there something else? Claire, I have a feeling you have opinions about this. Go ahead.
No, I definitely think you don't, because particularly, I mean, I don't have puppies, but I have 2 young cats, and we've always been a family that had cats. Like even when I was with my parents, And you've got to kind of realize that yes, it'll bring you joy, but you're not going to have perfection. They don't like follow a whole like almost like a structure of what you think might go on in life. They're not going to, it's, you know, like having humans living in a home. You're never going to have the picture perfect, you know, like the show house or what's set up for like a magazine or something, you know, these sort of great pictures which like, you know, inspire you to do your interior decoration that way, because there are living things in it. I mean, I'm talking about humans and puppies, children, kittens, you name it. It's never going to bring a structure. But I do notice that, like, even if I visit my family, and most of them have different pets, that the pets don't behave when there are visitors around, and they're like apologizing. Like, we even have, you know, blankets on various seats which we remove when we have visitors because they're covered in animal fur. So we kind of, you know, there's an indefinite thing I would say is you've got to appreciate, and I think a lot of people, I mean, even from people I know who are super tidy, who've got pets, and they have changed so much in their outlook, their personal outlook, and the way their home is.
And there's an assumption behind that they've improved somehow.
Well, I would say, like, one person I'm thinking of in particular has relaxed. I mean, this person was always like super tidy, and when they told me they were getting a kitten for her children, I was like, gosh, wow, somebody like you. But she has, like, it's changed her, like, she's probably almost become mad about the cat. And it's like you've gone from having this picture perfect home and sort of out, not so much outlook, but, you know, generally a very tidy person, to, gosh, the cat's allowed on the beds.
That's it. And when I try to explain to my sister why the dog is allowed on the beds, it's because that's the point of her. She's there for love. She's there for cuddles. There's no point in having a dog that doesn't sit on your feet. So all of a sudden you start reframing, and it's not about having an Instagram life. All of a sudden it's about having a life that's got relationship in it. And that this little Labrador of ours has become this love bug who just goes around from person to person, giving them the love that they need. And it's really interesting that it's messy. So we went for a walk in the park yesterday, bumped into some friends with their own dog and 5 small children. I kid you not. So they are balmy and totally gorgeous. And we were laughing about how badly behaved our Moxie is. And he said, rather than saying to her, sit, why don't you say, do what a dog would do? She'll always do what you want. I think about the work that we do with students, right? It actually is something from The Little Prince. Jenna, maybe you've read that, The Little Prince. And Jan, you know, yeah, The Little Prince.
It's my favorite book.
Right? What does the king say?
The king?
The king, he gives instructions that they do exactly that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the one hand, that's ridiculous that the king gives instructions that the little prince does exactly what he was intending.
And ask the sun to rise, the sun to come down.
There you go. If you ask somebody to do their nature,
yeah,
you'll always be delighted. What does that look like for you in your tutoring? So what does it look like for you with students who aren't following that formal picture perfect set of expectations? That's our bread and butter. Go ahead.
That's a difficult question. I have no answer to.
Really?
Oh, I feel like every student has a reason why they're not following your instructions. So instead of telling them, you should do that, you should do this, I want to understand first why you're not doing this.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And I think, okay, if it's a valid reason, then we can talk about it, we can adjust it. So for me, I don't think I have a set of rules that everyone should follow if it doesn't make sense for everyone. So that's what I'm thinking.
It can either be informing you about your student and their needs, or it could be informing you about your lesson plan and it's not a good fit. Claire, what are your thoughts about responding to or leaning into the nature of your students?
Well, I think just like when you said, do they, you know, like Jan's saying about the quote, you know, it comes up, the sun comes up, it goes down. Yeah. I personally, in my whole experience of tutoring and teaching, I don't find any students will follow the sort of prescriptive model. You know, people think, oh, it'd be so nice just to have these students who will sort of you work on an assignment, they work on an assignment, they do it absolutely everything you want within the time. I don't think in my whole experience I've ever experienced that. I've kind of gone back with a sort of an intuition, because of course I give them the, we work on stuff, and they, if they need pieces of work, if they need explanation, we'll stop as we go. But I don't think there's anybody that I could say, yep, there, there's my checklist, they respond perfectly to it. But because it goes back to what I think again, when we're responding to other humans, this is the way it is. They're not going to be sort of a book, they're not a guide, they're not a textbook guide, so to speak. They're going to be responding, and they're all different, they're all going to be with you for different reasons. So I don't think I could really say that there's anybody in the whole time that I've ever worked with students that has ever followed an absolute perfect model, and it's been, here we go, and I know, and I'll know next lesson this will be, they follow the same thing, because they don't. I honestly think so.
I think what that tells me is so much about you and your willingness to keep your mind open, because it's just easier to make assumptions that all people fit into these boxes, all children will travel this path. And it is exhausting to hold your mind open to every single student is different. Every student is a world unto themselves. Jenna, what are your thoughts? I saw your frown.
I disagree. I can't hold on to this idea that all students have to achieve the same things. I think it's absolute bollocks. Excuse the language. I can't do it. I mean, I have zero expectations or requirements or formalities of my students. They don't even have to be in the room. They don't have to show up. They don't have to sit. They don't have to look at me. They don't have to talk to me. They don't have to, they can ignore me and play on their video games if they need to.
But why do you disagree? So the point that I was making was that it would be easier for students to be predictable, and that it's exhausting to stay at the drawing board. And why is that something that you find difficult to?
Well, I don't know. I can't do that. I never have been able to. And I think that maybe it's that I have similar chaos to many of my students. I am thoroughly neurospicy. One of the reasons I work really well with young people with PDA, for example, pathological demand avoidance, which is being overwhelmed by the concept of demand, of requirement, is because I struggle with it myself.
That's really helpful.
I don't think that even sure, I take quite high needs, quite vulnerable young people, but I also take more traditional kind of tutoring students, whether full-time or part-time or anywhere in between. And I don't think it matters. I don't think that having any of those structures that you see in traditional formal education is what gets academic results. And sure, you need structure, you need consistency, some students need rigidity, and all of that. And I don't think that means that even if it's exactly the same timetable or the exact same structures for two students, that doesn't mean that anyone can react to that in the same way. And you can't day to day, even yourself, you are not the same every day, hour to hour. You could suddenly get a headache. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just want to talk a bit more about the individuality of the individual. Have you heard of the story of Procrustes' bed?
No, please tell us.
So he is a son of Poseidon in the Greek mythology, and he has a weird habit that he invites every traveler to lie down on his bed, and if you're taller, he will cut you down to fit the bed, If you're shorter, he will stretch you to fit the bed. So that is the analogy in the Greek mythology for one size fits all. It doesn't really respect the uniqueness of every individual. And that reminds me and resonates me so much about the education. It's exactly a progressive bed. It just apply it the same bed to every student.
Fantastic. One size fits none. I think that is really, really a powerful analogy. Thank you so much. And one more thing about the puppy story, to come back to the book for a second. Wasn't the idea of Oprah picking up poo fabulous? Isn't that stuff? Go on. Go on.
We all have our shit to deal with. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how little, you still got your shit to deal with.
There you go. And the humility of her saying, and I empathize and have newfound respect for mothers raising babies, the humility in that, right? So somebody who is as awesomely successful as Oprah, taking the time to teach puppies manners sounds like a very wonderful thing to me. Ready for the next one? Every challenge we take on has the power to knock us to our knees. But what's even more disconcerting than the jolt itself is our fear that we won't withstand it. When we feel the ground beneath us shifting, we panic. We forget everything we know and allow fear to freeze us. Just the thought of what could happen is enough to throw us off balance. What I know for sure is that the only way to endure the quake is to adjust your stance. You can't avoid the daily tremors. They come with being alive. But I believe these experiences are gifts that force us to step to the right or left in search of a new center of gravity. Don't fight them. Let them help you adjust your footing. Balance lives in the present. When you feel the earth moving, bring yourself back to the now. You'll handle whatever shakeup the next moment brings when you get to it. In this moment, you're still breathing. In this moment, you've survived. In this moment, you're finding a way to step onto higher ground.
I love that.
Tell me, Anne.
I just feel like what matters is your mindset, is your attitude. No matter what life comes to you, what life throws at you, as long as you always have a positive, resilient mindset, then you cannot be defeated.
Very nice. Have you come across the book, The One Thing it's called, by Keller? I can't remember his first name. It's an organization book, and he says you do not need to write to-do lists. There's only one thing you need to do at any one time. And he uses the metaphor of a ballet dancer on point who is never ever still. She's constantly
Adjusting
her feet to adjust. Yeah. And that's what this sounded like to me. That's the resilience, the ability to know that to be on point and to be in the moment means constant adjusting. And that becomes very different to what we expect. We expect constants. And actually, the only constant is change, as I shared in my newsletter last week. Claire, what are your thoughts about this this idea from Oprah?
Well, I think you've got to realize and appreciate for your own development as a person, plus with your students. I do think, you see that, yes, there, like you say, there's always a building block that you're going to be putting onto something. I mean, I know certain things when I've wanted to learn things and it's felt like a bit like, oh, no, I don't want to do that now. And then it's like suddenly when things click into place, it's that much more, it's the resilience and the way that you handle it and how you instill that within your own personal being, plus what you're going to be doing when you're developing your students, how you get them to see that, okay, maybe there's a couple of setbacks along the way, but this is how you move forward. And that's really what I would say it seemed like that was looking at, how we kind of each is a stepping stone, and sometimes the stepping stone can feel a bit like we're stuck on it, but then suddenly there'll be a movement to the next part.
I think there's also with the students that sense that on the one hand, we're trying to get them somewhere, but on the other hand, we have to be on this stepping stone with them right now. And being in that present with them and not making assumptions that if they don't do this, then it's all gonna, certainly as a parent, it's very easy to make assumptions that where your child is now is where they're always going to be. And so this refocusing on the present becomes very, very important, because otherwise it becomes self-fulfilling. Your worry creates the failure, creates the disasters, the fissures in confidence. The point that she says here about limiting self-beliefs, about it's the fear of failure that throws us off balance, felt very, very true to me. What are your thoughts?
It's really hard not to second guess yourself.
Do you need to not second guess yourself?
Sometimes.
Go on.
Sometimes it's the overthinking that stops you from taking a risk, or from, you know, especially for those of us who have anxiety, or, you know, those moments of imposter syndrome even. Sometimes if you start overthinking it and over planning something, that is when you don't enjoy it, or it doesn't go to plan, or it sounds more overwhelming, or
I think absolutely right. And I think that eventually you can build an instinct for trusting your gut, can't you? And that sort of shooting from the hip is part of knowing that you will get it wrong and having permission to get it wrong, right? And living in gentle ways that allows for you to get it wrong sometimes. I'm not flying a plane, right? So if I was flying a plane, there would be no tolerance for error. But in my day-to-day life, there is lots of tolerance for error, fortunately, because I use most of it. Go on, Jenna.
They build in tolerance for error. When in planes, for example, I was listening to a slightly terrifying podcast yesterday about you know, the windshields on a plane. When you have to change them, or, you know, build it for the first time, they have to be bolted in a way that means that that pressure difference at height doesn't rip the windshield off. And they build in specific tolerance for different levels of air pressure, but they also build in tolerance for different types of bolts and screws.
Okay.
You can put in for most of them, especially in this particular Boeing plane. You can have bolts that are too short, and you can have bolts that are a tiny bit too long, but you cannot have bolts that are a little bit too slim.
Of course you can't. I actually love that. Fantastic. And margin for error is something that absolutely should be built in. I often point out to my kids how dangerous it is that people drive their own cars. You know, in a generation's time, when there are self-driving cars, we'll look back on the idea of humans being in control of cars and think that is so dangerous.
Saying that, though, people around, just around cars, around things like that is terrifying as well.
Jenna, what are your Jan, what are your thoughts?
To be honest, every time when I tell people that I cycle every day around London, people are like, really? You're so brave.
And does it feel like that?
Well, I don't know whether it's because I'm bold or whatever. I feel it's okay, but it's true that in London, a lot of places they don't have the cyclist path. So you have to squeeze yourself with the buses, the cars just next to you. And that's, yeah, it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. So I'm just coming back to it exactly. And because I thought we were off track, and we're absolutely not. She says, just the thought of what could happen is enough to throw us off balance. It's a perfect metaphor for riding a bicycle. Right.
Why do you think so, Julia?
Why? Because, I mean, for me, I would see the lorry or anticipate a lorry, and I mean, I would cause my own problems because I am not a confident cyclist. Right, you guys, this is what we're going to do with the last 15 minutes. I'm going to give you each an opportunity to tell me what you know for sure and why. Do you need some thinking time?
I feel like I'm a bit agnostic. I don't feel like I'm sure about anything.
Oh, Tell me.
Yeah, because I feel like if you're really sure about something, does that mean you're somehow close-minded? You're not accepting new ideas. So I consider myself a very open-minded person. So I'm very flexible in terms of accepting new idea that challenges my original belief. So I wouldn't say so I'm sure about anything in the world.
Fascinating. Dig deeper. Dig deeper. Tell me what thing you have just expressed a commitment to open-mindedness.
Yeah.
So rephrase that as a something I'm sure of.
Well, yeah, I would say maybe I'm sure about something about myself, but
Yes.
sometimes I'm not sure about myself either. Maybe at the moment I say that, yeah, I consider myself an open-minded person. It's a statement about now, but maybe in the future somehow I feel like, oh, actually I do agree with you. I still hold my own onto my own opinion. Then at that moment I won't be open-minded. So I
Okay.
feel like that's why I feel like, yeah, you're not sure about anything in the world. You're maybe sure about what's happened at the moment, but in the future you might not be sure again. So
Okay.
that's why I feel like myself a bit agnostic.
Are
That's
there,
another statement.
it is, it's beautiful. Are there any universals?
Hmm. I would say in general, about everything. I don't think there's any objectivity in the world,
Oh,
uh, because everything you see is just part of it, and then you can never have the whole picture of something. So that's yeah, my
that's
opinion.
fantastic. So do you know the story of the five wise men, the five blind men and the elephant?
Yes, that's actually a Chinese idiom, I think. So a Chinese idiom's like the blind, I don't know what's five, but some blind man, they're trying to touch different parts of an elephant, and each one says a different thing. Yeah, that's actually a Chinese idiom.
Fantastic. So that's for me, that's what you're saying there with the subjectivity. And it
Yeah.
comes right back to what we were saying about the unreliable narrator and just understanding how subjective we can be. And that's totally fascinating. Thank you. Claire, can I call on you next? What do you know for sure?
Well, I'm going to take it from a different perspective, not
Great.
philosophical. I know for sure, I know that because of the way the earth spins, that there is night and there is day. That's a literal perspective, and that's what the first thing that came to my mind. I thought, oh gosh, let's go to that first thing, because I thought, yes, I understand sort of the philosophical and how perception is. People are sure of the unsure or sure of things in different ways. But I thought, irrespective of where we are in the world, because of the spin of the earth, we know that there'll be night and there will be day, in the sense, that light and darkness. I mean, obviously then you can take that into a perspective of how you see that light and darkness, but I know those are two definites that I
Yeah.
know of.
Well, I think what's beautiful about that is that it's given us bedrock, hasn't it? If you think about the mental health crisis at the moment, it's that lack of bedrock that's one of the things that's really. Oh, just a second. Sorry, just a second. Those are my very impatient Legoland children who are waiting by the door because we're going to Legoland after this conversation.
Today.
They are. What I know for sure is enthusiasm is the most glorious thing. Claire, I think that night and day is really blooming helpful. I think that we lose track in our abstract lives. I think that online connectivity creates so much opportunity that we can totally get lost. And knowing what facts are true.
Completely. I mean, that's also why I say things like that, because going back, if we're going to sort of thinking of the connectivity, the online world, it's sort of a good reminder, and sort of linking with mental health as well, how it is so important that, yes, I'm sure every single person on this call does an element of work online. They might do face to face, they might might whatever go to places. But sort of it's an important thing to get the balance that also, take it to simplicity. That you step outside your front door, you're exposed to sort of the elements in the sense of something that's good for the mental health, in the sense, having like a 10-minute time with daylight that's good for us to balance our minds. Because I know, I mean, certainly I'm aware, if I don't go out during the day, I feel it.
Yeah, I think we have all experienced that recently, and it's a new experience for most of us. And we're learning that. My eldest uses the phrase touching grass. When we first brought the puppy home, he said, "Oh, that's good because it will help us to touch grass more often." And there's something about the mindfulness, being in the present, and absolutely, as you say, seeing daylight, Claire, that feels very, very, and also darkness feels very healthy. It's probably worth also thinking about the metaphor of light and dark and how reliable they are. That the phrase that I always think of is "this too shall pass." So when things are at their sunniest, they will pass, so enjoy them. And when things are at their darkest, they will pass. You just have to keep going. And that sort of experience that we learn from life can be helpful also as a metaphor. Do you allow me to do a little bit of philosophy on top of your light and dark, Claire?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I just thought that because I thought, well, if I take this on a philosophical direction, we'll be here beyond 12, and the Legoland trip will get delayed.
Well, that's why Jenna's last. Jenna, over to you, my darling. Go ahead.
So my sentence came to me pretty much straight away because it's something that actually comes up a fair bit for me, because it's a similar question to what my students ask sometimes. So mine is, I know for sure that I can never be omniscient, but I'll never stop seeking knowledge and wisdom.
Can you type that sentence in the chat? I love that, Jenna.
Yeah. So let's repeat it as well. I know for sure that I will never be omniscient, but I will always strive to learn more. Is that right?
Essentially, yeah.
So there's two parts to that, and even the first part just hits the spot for me. I will never be omniscient is such a relief.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
It's so sad though. I want to learn everything. I want to know all of the things, and I wish I had the time to learn how everything works and to learn all of the languages and learn all of the science.
I've been reading Matt Haig's The Humans, and I don't entirely love it. I'm not sure. Have you read it?
I've read part of it, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure I recommend it because it's a little bit twee, to be honest. But the idea that you can take a knowledge pill and access all knowledge, and the idea that humans have this inefficient way of accessing knowledge. But then as he goes through the book, so he's an alien, he's come down to Earth, he's experiencing the human process. And first he found it totally ridiculous, and then he finds it intriguing. And I think by the end of the book, he's going to admire and actually envy it. And there's something, to come back to the day and night thing, there's something about the journey, Jenna, that is just as glorious as the outcome. And omniscient is possibly not as exciting as learning.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the thing. And like, there's this book I was reading recently. I'm fairly sure. I can't. No, it was one of the Jasper Fords, and it was, you can be shown a color and just know stuff. And I hate that idea. I love the experience, the learning of it, the sparking, that spark of joy you get when you suddenly realize you know something, or you can do something, or that something suddenly makes sense. Yeah.
But the penny dropping, that's interesting. I prefer spark of joy to penny dropping, because penny dropping sounds final, whereas spark of joy sounds like an invitation.
Yeah, and I think even if you think about the pitch of it, like you drop a penny like into water where it goes, whatever, it goes plunk. The spark of joy is like ping,
and it ripples and it goes outwards. Okay, so 2 minutes left, and I want to ask you, Are you enjoying this kind of using books as a provocation for a conversation? And are you happy to continue for that monthly until
Definitely.
I
I love
yes.
it. I love
Oh,
it,
Yeah.
Julia.
fantastic. Claire, do you
Yeah.
have any insights? Go ahead.
No, I do, because I think it's good. I as I say, I do a book club, and even though we do use a book and everybody reads it, and it kind of provokes conversation about the book, and then sort of goes into the general side of, different things. I do think it's a nice thing to use it as like a prompt kind of thing, to get the mind going, and consider, not just like working as a tutor, but also your own outlook, so to speak. So yeah, I think it is a good thing.
Great. I'm so glad it hit the spot, because you did not know what you were going to come into today, did you? And, and in such a small group, you had to work really hard. So I'm glad it hit the spot for you. For me, my degree was in English and philosophy. So this is my sweet spot. I could do this all day. My lovely friends, I'm going to wrap up now. I'm going to thank you for participating in this open-ended exploration that got way philosophical. We did Greek mythology, we did Chinese mythology, we did The Little Prince, we did Tara Westover's Educated, which is a fantastic novel, and we did What I Know for Sure by Oprah Winfrey. Love Tutoring is all about embracing how tutoring can allow us, as well as our students, to be our best selves. It is pointing to gentler and more intentional ways to deliver education. And that's who we are here. We're people who are pointing to better ways and making a difference every day for our young people. The Qualified Tutor Professional Development Community is all about making sure that tutors are safe, skilled, and supported. And the WhatsApp group in our community is bubbling with insights constantly. Our training is making a difference for tutors every day, and we are constantly bringing more resources to help tutors to do what they need to do to be the tutor that their student needs. So on that note, I will thank you. If you are not yet a member and you are watching this, please do find out about how to become a member. We want to welcome you in. Thank you again to Jan. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Claire. Have an awesome weekend. Bye.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.